This Week in Radio Tech, episode 157, is brought to you by the Telos ProStream, a plug-and-play appliance that processes and encodes audio for high-quality internet streaming on the web at telos-systems.com/ProStream.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twert.
Can FM broadcasters monetize their big signals with data services? You betcha. They're doing it right now, and consumers benefit too.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Doc?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land,
this is Kirk Harnack.
Paul Brenner of the Broadcasters Traffic Consortium joins us for a provocative look into data delivery to millions of consumers over FM radio.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hello there, it's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. I'm glad that you're along. We're going to have a good show for you on this day, this evening, if you're watching us live. Well, unless it's in the morning in Australia, to our good friends in Australia. Or you're watching it any time of the day if you download it, if you subscribe to the podcast. There's all kinds of ways to do that. In fact, I'll go ahead and mention it right now. Head on over to thisweekinradiotech.com, and you can see all of the past episodes there, at least most of them. And from there, you can watch, listen, you can subscribe, download, all those things from that website. Or, if you choose, you can go over to gfqnetwork.com. And do the same thing there. Download, listen, watch, subscribe at that website. So this is the show where we talk about radio technology, and it's really changing. There's a lot of cool things happening, and that is precisely the subject of this episode with Paul Brenner. First, I want to bring in a couple of my co-hosts, a couple of regulars. I want to thank Chris Tobin, the best-dressed engineer in radio, for hosting on last week's show while I was in New Zealand. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. No problem. I had a good time. Stephen Poole and myself, we had a lot of good laughs, and I hope the audience that took the on-demand files also had a good time. Sorry to hear you didn't have the bandwidth you needed, but it worked out well. We missed Tom Ray, though. I don't know what happened to Tom.
Yeah, I'd like to have Stephen Poole back. I watched about half of the show actually this morning in the kitchen while I was doing some other stuff here at the house, and I was really impressed with Stephen. I knew he'd be a good guest, but I really enjoyed hearing. It's great to hear his Alabama Southern drawl when talking about such high-tech technical things. That's as cool as can be.
No, he was great. He was brilliant.
I want to have him back on the show. So, Chris, you've done engineering, and you're now, for disclosure purposes, running the folks at Music Cam USA, right?
Yes, CCS Music Cam USA. We do audio IP codecs, video IP as well, and a few other things we're working on. And prior to that, about 28 years worth of AM/FM engineering, and working with some television stations as well. So a well-rounded background. So I'm having some good time now.
And joining us from Mukwonago, Wisconsin, home of the free and the brave, it's the Ninjaneer, Chris Tarr. Hi, Chris.
Hello there. I am Chris Tarr. I am, let's see, how do I count off all the things that I do? Let's see. I am the Director of Operations and Engineering for 88.9 Radio Milwaukee.
Stand by, Paul.
I also continue to work for, let's see here. I continue to work for Intercom in Madison and Milwaukee. I do contract engineering work. I'm a contributing writer to Radio Guide magazine, co-founded the website The Virtual Engineer at broadcastengineering.info, and am just an all-around fun guy.
You are, and all that, and you still hit me up for $5 at the last NAB. What's up with that?
You know, I didn't say I got paid for any of this stuff. It's just stuff that I do.
The funny thing was, I didn't have it either. So. All right. Well, we're those things out of the way. And I don't know where Tom Ray is. Bless his heart. I hope he's okay. I know what was today his last day at WOR? Did he walk out the door today?
Oh, is it today? No, I think tomorrow.
It was tomorrow? Because he had something on Facebook about it after 15 and a half years. Now, we knew he was leaving WOR. He put out a press release about that. But I think maybe it's tomorrow that it's his last day there. Well, we wish Tom well and hope he comes back on our show real soon. Our guest, I'm really delighted to have Paul Brenner of MS Communications. Paul, is that it? On our show.
That is correct.
And I'm sorry, I thought I had.
That's who pays my paycheck is MS Communications. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, Paul, at MS, you are in charge of what? All the engineering, the IT engineering. Tell us about what you do there.
It's I could read a resume like Chris did. over the years, I think I've just kind of absorbed everything. So if it has technology in the name, it's part of my purview, I guess. IT, engineering, digital development, new media. It kind of all rolls up under my effort, and it's actually kind of worked because I can look for those synergies and build probably a better team, I think. But my team might argue, but that's gone well so far.
Tell us, our audience, about the award you got from NAB last year. It was a pretty prestigious award you received, wasn't it?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty shocked. It was the NAB Engineering Award, which they, of course, split in half radio, half television. And, I won the radio side of it, mostly for my work with the BTC, or the Broadcaster Traffic Consortium, and the success I've had with that. But I tell you, I was shocked. They called me at home on a Sunday and told me that they had chosen to select me. And I actually said, there are definitely people in this industry that put a lot more blood, sweat, and tears into it, and passion and energy over the years. I feel like I'm relatively young in the industry for that. But I think they wanted to show some effort around kind of new innovation, and the BTC is actually pretty successful as a technology and as a business. So they honored me with it, and I loved it, and completely look up to the other people, Glenn Waldens and Tom Sillimans and Smitty's and folks that have won in the past. I've learned so much from them directly. I was honored to be pulled into that group.
Well, the reason I had you bring that up about winning this NAB Engineering Award is you have a bit different track in your history than most other folks who have been so honored, and most other folks who are doing big things in engineering in the industry. And that is, your career track didn't begin in radio like so many of us who started spinning records at the age of 15. Well, tell us about your background, and then we're going to get into the technologies where you and some of your friends and colleagues and partner companies are leading the way, hopefully into a very good future for radio broadcasting.
Yeah, I used to run moonshine in the South. That's where I started. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I grew up in a small town, in Evansville, Indiana, and I think that the way I came up was much more of a blue collar type of world, and decided early on, in my early 20s to pursue a technology career, but it was always an IT career. I was building black box computers in 1992 and selling them before people could buy Dells and things like this, and kind of moved into that era of activating internet features for companies. A first time, oh, look, our company's on the internet. Our company has internet email. I lived through that in the early 90s and kind of moved through that generation. In fact, the first product I ever built, and this is for the true geeks in the audience, was a software gateway that would dial into an internet server and convert asynchronous modem email to SMTP internet email. And that was the first product I ever built and sold it to a couple companies. That was in 1993, I think. And just kind of, entrepreneurial things happened from there. And, I think my first ever exposure for, from an IT guy in media world, TV and radio world, was a Fox affiliate in a Fox affiliate TV station in Evansville. I don't remember the call sign, to be honest with you. But they hired me to put in a computer network and a Columbine server, and kind of built it from there. And from there, I went into consulting for about 6 years, and ultimately ended up here at Emmis.
Wow. Well, okay. Well, so you did have some broadcast experience before you got to Emmis, and I know that we were talking before the show about some of Emmis's overseas properties. By the way, we're going to get to the two big topics for the show here. But I'm a little bit curious. You got to do engineering for broadcast in Europe and in South America too?
I mean, Emmis has always dabbled in international. I mean, we had stations in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and sold those properties when they devalued the dollar. At that point in the early 2000s, we got out. We've done business in Belgium, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Hungary. I'd say my role, honestly, has always been the middleman. So while I understand the engineering of the station and the RF I'm not a master at that, and I greatly respect the people that can build, the antennas and the great transmission systems. And then I understand the IT side, and I've always been that guy in the middle that kind of brings those two worlds together. So when I worked in Argentina, that was 2000, 99, 2000, 2001. Helped them build on-air systems and automation and traffic, and link their transmitter site over STLs and do some of that early work. They definitely, there's always been engineers in my life and in Emmis that really are the guys that can handle that RF side. And I love those guys. I respect them and rely on them. But I've done that work all over the world, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a whole lot. And here in the U.S., I continue to do it. I continue to rely on my engineers every day.
So let's then move into this notion about the Broadcasters Traffic Consortium. Hey, apparently Chris Tarr has some experience with it. Chris Tobin, did you deal with these guys when you were at CBS?
No, we didn't. No. If we did, it was through our shadow and Metro Traffic relationships, but not directly, no.
All right. Well, then let's get right into it. This
Chris is going old school with the shadow reference.
Sorry. Okay. Traffic Pulse and was it?
And he got his news from the neutral broadcasting system.
If you want to follow along at home, there's a website. It's radiobtc.com. Mentioned that earlier in the show. Radiobtc.com, and there's a link there on the menu how it works. And now I want to get Paul to tell us about how it works. What is the Broadcaster Traffic Consortium, and how is this going to be helpful to not only to radio, but how's it helpful to consumers and radio?
Do you guys have you covered HD radio as a technology on this show before?
Yeah, we have. We talk about it pretty frequently, and we've covered the technology in some depth. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are the people that have been on the show before? I'm curious. On the HD radio topic, like Ubiquity people or broadcasters?
Broadcasters. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, I was, it's a funny story. 2006, which is many years ago, really, now that I think about it. Holy cow. I sat down in a room with Jeff Smolian, who's my boss here in Indy at MS Communications, and who you don't know, that's CEO of MS, and Rick Cummings, who is the president of programming for MS, and said, hey, guys, I got this idea. I think HD radio is great. I think it sounds good. I think multicasting's, a fun new way to build some brands. But I got to tell you, I think the real thing here is using that spectrum to send data, and to compete. Because I kind of foresaw a mobile broadband world that would become more competitive and higher use. Not that I'm that much of a fortune teller, but I could see a world where all bits get used. I guess is the way you would kind of think about that.
Yeah, and I should point out, for those that aren't quite familiar with technology, one thing that a broadcaster has that a Wi-Fi hotspot doesn't have, or a cellular provider doesn't have, is a broadcaster in many markets will have a tall tower and a big honking transmitter and a antenna that may be 100 feet tall on the tower itself. We can throw those bits a long ways. Now, everybody's got to receive the same bits, so it's not necessarily customized in moment by moment, but we can throw bits a long ways.
You couldn't have scripted that segue any better right there. That was pretty good, because I think that the real value of HD radio as a data service really only matches up with mass market information, right? So, to say you're going to use HD radio data services to do things that would be interactive, right, that would require a back channel or a response, they really don't match up. As an idea. And I think I told you earlier today when we were doing kind of the prep for this, I'm a technology guy, and I get the IT side, I get the engineering side, and I always process that kind of in the back of my head, will this work? Will it come together? But I know that any great solution has to have a reason. It has to have a business that goes with it. And that's really what BTC came from, was here's all this spectrum that we own, we control it, we don't have to pay anybody else for it as long as we stay in good standing with the FCC. And, we can find data that has a mass market reach where, that big tall stick with that big powerful antenna can cover every car in a metro, every household in a metro. What can we send? And I poke fun at Chris about the shadow, but I started that business, BTC, with traffic.com. and a lot of the guys that came from there, Ivan Schulman and Gary Lee and a few people like that, and we pieced this thing together and said that really traffic, the utilitarian traffic, weather, fuel prices, other stuff, you could think of news, sports, things that are really mass market are best suited for that. And that's really how we came together with BTC, is I put that in front of 8 groups, including Intercom and a bunch of others, Beasley, Radio 1, NPR, Emmis, Greater Media, 8 of them. I can't remember all of them. And formed that company. And from there, we are 7 years in, and I can tell you, we're doing really, really well.
So help me understand, I guess, the data, the technology, the information flow model for BTC. On your How It Works tab, you mentioned things like traffic, weather, fuel prices, advertising, future needs, connection health. These are some of the data types. How do you aggregate this, and what happens to it when it gets out the transmitter?
Have you ever used Bing.com or Google and seen the when you toggle on traffic, and you can see it either on your phone or on a website?
Oh yeah, on my Android phone, sure.
Red and yellow, color-coded streets.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's content that is created by a company like Nokia or Navtech, who I work with. And essentially what we did is we convinced them that because we're so much more efficient and our business model is good, they have the same data they send over satellite, over broadband. We basically convinced them to make an investment and format that data to an iBuiquity HD radio specification. And really, that is the same data that you would get. What we broadcast on HD radio is the same content that you would get if you were looking at Bing through a mobile broadband link.
Huh. Okay. And you mentioned during our before the show, you mentioned, for example, the manufacturer Garmin. You said that they use this data to display traffic.
Every Garmin sold. Yeah, every Garmin sold. If you go look at a Garmin in a box, I think I have one. Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
Sure.
So I have a Garmin. So I'm bringing it. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but on the Garmin, you see free lifetime traffic.
Oh, yes. So that kind of is your clue that this is not coming from a cellular company, because that would cost a lot of money over time, wouldn't it?
That is correct. We eliminated the entitlement fee, the subscription, the user cost, because we're so efficient and we can price it better. Garmin and other automakers, Honda, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, lots of companies actually rely on our data over the air, and they've found that because it's so expected by the automaker, not by the auto purchaser, the consumer, because they expect to have that utility in their car. They want to just they want to get it in there. They want to be innovative, but they want to do it in an efficient but good way. So that Garmin was where we started. We started those guys back 4 years ago on RDS, and we've converted them to an all HD model. Mitsubishi Outlander was announced at the LA Auto Show with us a little bit earlier in LA, back I think it was December. We've got a couple other automakers that are about ready to launch with us, and it's a great business. I can tell you this, and this is probably the biggest reason most people got involved with it, was the content and the reason for the content is ultimately going to push satellite receivers out of some cars. And that strategically, that is a massive change for our industry. And I really think that's going to come together, because we've offered something that's not just another format of music, but a true service that's innovative and important to the automaker.
What's the financial model then if the consumer's not paying something monthly? I realize we have a good terrestrial HD radio. We have some bits left over that we can not use for audio, but use for this data transmission. Just as you were doing with RDS, and I'd like you to compare and contrast those in a minute. But okay, how's anybody making much money with this? Just with the money that Garmin pays a fee for, and then they can give it away?
Essentially, this is kind of unusual for radio people to understand, but we have a network, we have participants, we have stations that we've pieced together, much like you'd see a Verizon map, right? You remember the cartoon with the two guys that would stand next to each other? One had a Verizon map over their head, one had an AT&T map, and these are my red coverage, these are my blue coverage. We basically built that map using HD predictive models, typical Longley Rice models at a slightly varied curve for digital spectrum. And we hand selected the stations that we could utilize. We approached those companies. Intercom was mentioned earlier, was one of the companies. CBS is one of the companies. Essentially everybody but Clear Channel, only because they have their own service, and offered them to be involved. And what that means to be involved is, like any station, if you are the biggest station in the market, you probably have the best ratings and the best revenue, right? If you're Class B, you're a great station. If you're a Class A, you're probably a smaller coverage, smaller revenue station. So we go for the biggest stations we can find, and we say, by our Arbitron population coverage, that's the share of our revenue for you. And we found that to be a very easy number for people to digest, for radio stations to understand. If you're in market 5 and your population share equals 3.5% of the American population, that's how much of our revenue you get. And we've just kind of built that out over 100 markets. And we get, basically Nokia goes out, they make relationships with these automakers and these navigation device makers. I'm often in tow around the world, sitting in front of these guys and telling the story of how broadcast is awesome and HD radio is fantastic for them. And some get technical, some doesn't. And they pay Nokia, and Nokia gets money, and then for that distribution, the BTC takes a cut of it. And it's essentially a pass-through. I formed this company not to make profit for me or Emmis. That wasn't the intent. The intent was to really show a market that radio could be used for different things. Emmis themselves, we only make as much as the stations we cover, which is a pretty small amount compared to some of the other groups. So we take money in, we allocate it by percentage of revenue, by population, and we just mail checks to people. So that's really the model.
So, I've got a couple technical questions here. Now that I got the money out of the way, or it's an interesting enough for stations to participate, for the consortium to exist, and put this together, which I really appreciate. There's some concern in the chat room. Well, hey, you're taking all this data away from the music. Doesn't it sound crappy enough on HD? When they're running too many HD channels. How much data are you using? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from an area that wasn't allocated for music anyway? Tell us about the technicalities here of the data.
It's a common question. It's a really common question, and I think you'll get different opinions from different people when it comes to audio fidelity. Especially guys that, golden ear guys and people that like to mess around with their processing a lot. I mean, you'll get that, from anybody. The approach I took early on is I paid a woman, I think Ellen Sheffield. Does anyone know Ellen Sheffield on the call? Maybe not. She is on the East Coast, and she's done a whole lot of radio subjective listening tests. And the common thing you would see coming out of Ubiquity, particularly around the FCC, because the law says your HD1 has to sound as good or better than your FM simulcast, right? That's part of the law that's written by the FCC for digital radio. So, but that is written in a way that's, is it 8, 16, 24, 32, 48, 64? Those are the kilobit per second allocations. What I did early on is I paid Ellen to take a whole bunch of people in a room and do a subjective test on 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 30, all the way down to 24. Kilobit by kilobit per second, and said, where do people actually hear a difference? Where does it happen?
Yeah.
And do you know what that number was? Where people could tell a difference in audio fidelity between 24 and 64 kilobits per second over HD radio?
Couldn't guess, although it seems like I saw something about this, but that was in terms of the discussion of dividing your HD up into an HD2 and 3 and maybe even an HD4. So
maybe so.
What did Ellen come up with?
She came up with the best quality person, the person that could really tell a difference, and was that golden ear person, was about 40 kilobits per second. And 32 was the place where just about everybody said, okay, now I can hear a difference. So what we did is we built a model, and we said, we would like to have, because we built out this ability to send a certain amount of data in a certain amount of time in order to make the automaker happy. We decided that number through testing was 13 kilobits per second. Okay. And that's what we asked for from the station. And if you look at any station we have in America, most of them are doing some form of, 48 kilobits, 40 to 48 kilobits per second on HD1, around 32, 33 kilobits per second on an HD2, and then our services. And that still leaves room for album art and SIG and SYS and all this kind of thing. Some people activate MP3 and stick it up in the MP3 partition.
That's what I was going to ask you about. What and I need a little education here. What's this partition where if you add the two together, instead of 96 kilobits per second total, you can get something like, 120 or 122 kilobits per second?
You can get 122. Here's the little hidden nugget with HD radio. They're two completely different encoding algorithms. They don't marry. Oh. So it's actually 96 and 24. So you can't bridge between the two, because the 96 kilobits is encoded with a 256 byte slow packet, and an MP3 partition 24 is a 64 byte packet really, really fast. So they're two different, completely encoded. And so you can't say put part of music here and part of music here, part of data here, and part. It doesn't function that way. So, and in fact, if you allocate audio in MP3, you give up, even if you do a 12 kilobit mono, you gave up the rest of it because you can allocate nothing else. So we've kind of found a model that works. We have plenty of stations that run HD 1, 2, 3, and our data service on them. I think we've overcome that perception, but like I said, there's going to be lots of varying opinions on audio fidelity.
Sure, and golden ears, engineers like the guys who are here on the show with me, I'm sorry, I don't seem to be letting them in. They, and a lot of folks in the chat room too, would argue, wait a minute, anything less than some number, 256 kilobits AAC is just not acceptable to me. And I guess this either speaks to the quality of the HD radio codec that actually got implemented, not the first one that they tried, but the one they went to, or it speaks to that quality at medium and low bit rates, like 40 kilobits per second, or it speaks to that codec's not any better at 96 kilobits per second than it is at 40. In other words, where the people heard the degradation starting about 40 kilobits per second. But that may be another subject. It's not really germane to our conversation. The point is, you can get 13 kilobits per second, and that comes out of that main chunk, or is there any way you can get that out of the poorly named MP3 part?
80% of our broadcast partners, about 140 stations, put the data in the MP1, mostly because in the MP3, the carrier is a little more unstable, and particularly stations that are running minus 20, the noise gets in the way, and sometimes carrier lock is a little more difficult for data devices. So we try to stay away from it. If you're a minus 14, minus 10 station, it works a lot better in MP3. But a lot of our people end up in MP1 because they're getting a paycheck for this. And the last thing they want to do is be offline or have problems and lose their paycheck. So,
if a station chooses to sign up with you guys, or you pick them and you come to an agreement, and they're selling you the 13 kilobits per second,
it's both. Some come to us, we go to them.
If you did this with RDS, you got no more room on your RDS to sell to somebody else. Does a station that sells to you, can they sell some data to somebody else as well?
Yeah, if they can find a market, yeah, go for it.
I'll tell you, let me jump in on that one. The answer is yes. In fact, one of the things I did just recently was help. I guess I don't know if I can actually talk about names yet because of the non-disclosure, but working with a company to use RDS subcarriers as to address things like thermostats and power switches and industrial power like that to take over the old paging network. And I was able to make it work with the RDS information from Navtech. So absolutely, you can do it.
And this person that you can't talk about, and neither can I, approached us and said, "Hey, will we be able to coexist?" And I think we agreed that we could, and took a look at it. So, they're definitely.
In fact, that guy a few years ago is the guy I had him talk to get that started.
Very good. Good for you. You're an innovator.
I am.
So
I try.
okay, so here's my next. I'm not wrapping my brain around one idea here. Let's say I've got a Garmin GPS. It's got free traffic for life, and I'm driving. I'm out in the rural area. Don't have good HD coverage. I'm driving in toward Nashville, Tennessee. I guess there's an HD radio chipset in there, and it probably maybe it's in some way optimized to do this. How does it find the station that you guys found to transmit the data? Does it have to go up and down the FM band quietly in the background and do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's FM and HD, right? So we carry RDS and HD services on the same station. So if you're driving into that area, there's a pretty good chance FM RDS has better coverage than the HD radio, right? I mean, that's just, at an injection level of 4.5%, which is what we ask for RDS, the coverage for RDS in mobile cars is pretty good. So the design we have, whether it's a P&D or in a car, is that tuner scans, a dedicated tuner for data scans. It finds a station that either has that active RDS group, which is the 8A for RDS TMC. In a lot of cases, once it finds that, then it tunes to the HD, or it finds the HD channel using the typical tuning algorithms for HD radio, which is SYS and then SIG and then service ID. The tuner itself says, oh, this station is broadcasting traffic, whether it's RDS TMC or HD radio-based traffic. You're tuning it, you're sending it, I'm going to lock on to it, and then it finds this service ID, which is built into the spec, and it says, I'm service ID 1, which is who I'm licensed to, which would be kind of Garmin for us, or if it was another brand, I think BMW goes with Clear Channel, so they would be maybe service ID 2. And the unit says, oh, you're broadcasting this service. It looks like the one I'm tuned into is something I'm licensed to receive. So I activate it and just start streaming packets into the device.
Okay. Wow. How long does this take? How long does this take to acquire the station that's transmitting this data?
It varies. Technology. I mean, RDS tuning's fast. It's got fast tuning ability. HD radio is longer. FM is in the milliseconds, 100 milliseconds. HD radio is more like a second to a second and a half per call sign, per frequency. So, the first time you turn on your device for HD, it might take 10 minutes to finally acquire, but then it puts it in a table and it knows what stations you have available. So then from that point on, when you turn it on, it just locks onto that station.
Now curious, the GPS receiver knows where you are all the time. Is there any correlation between knowing where you are and the table that it builds?
Yeah, there's a location table. And if I cheated for you, I'd show you a back door on the Garmin unit. I don't have one here on front of me, where you can actually go in a back door screen and you can actually see the location table happening. And you can see, well, I'm in Nashville, but the closest markets around me are Chattanooga, Louisville, that kind of game, and it'll just have this table. So if you drove to those areas around, it would know immediately to skip on over to them. Wow. LTC is common. It's a common algorithm in RDS, I think.
Is the chipset in a Garmin that looks for the HD radio? Is it the same for the RDS and the HD? Is it one chipset that does this?
Yeah, I mean, there's an FM only chip that's been out there for a while. Scilabs is one, Frontier, Royal. There's several, and then the HD chips are for the mobile side are either Intel, which was Scyport, or Scilabs, which is a kind of a latecomer to the party, but doing pretty well. Both of them are really good chips. They're small, in the nanometer range. They're small power draw, 50 to 60 milliwatts. They're in the range of a mobile device. So one of those two are the ones I see often winning on the mobile side. In the car, it's different. Then you're going to get into NXP, TI, that kind of stuff. Wow. This is just amazing. Consumer technology married with this broadcast technology. When you guys put your heads together, I'm just amazed. Hey, we got to take a little break here. You I hope you have your propeller hat on, folks. You're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 157, with our guest Paul Brenner from MS Communications and also a company called Radio BTC. It's the Broadcasters Traffic Consortium. Our show, our co-host on the show, Christopher Todd,
Carr from Mukwonago, Wisconsin, and also Chris Tobin from New York City. We're going to get back to the show, but right now I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, and that's the folks who employ me. Thank goodness they do. The folks at Telos and the Telos Pro Stream. If you if you listen to the audio version of this very podcast, you're listening to a Telos Pro Stream at the GFQ network. To feed their audio distribution network, they use a Pro Stream. What does the Pro Stream do? Well, you can do what the Pro Stream does in a PC. It's pretty easy. You can do it with software from Omnia. You can do it with the software that's elsewhere out there on the market. You can even find free software to generate an MP3 or an MP3-like stream. But if you want to do it right and you want to not worry about, malware threats and persistent updates and all the things that Microsoft sends you or whatever operating system that you're using for updates, you can get an appliance. And that's the Telos Pro Stream. It's an appliance. It's a one-rack unit appliance. It's only about 5 inches deep, so it doesn't take up much room in your rack. It's pretty low power. It doesn't get hot. But it does have analog XLR balanced audio inputs, and it has a live wire audio input and output. So if you're already a LiveWire studio, you can just add a Telos Pro Stream to your network, plug it into a port on your LiveWire switch, and bam, you got the audio there. Well, the Pro Stream has two things in it that are really cool. Number one, it has an Omnia audio processor built in. It's a 3-band, so it's a multi-band Omnia processor with very clever, well-designed look-ahead limiting. And that makes it perfect to process audio that is then going to be bit rate reduced. In fact, we even give you an output of just the audio processor on the analog outputs and on the LiveWire output so that you can use this finely tuned Omnia processed audio that's, again, appropriate for going into a bit rate reduced encoder. And you can use that anywhere you want. You can listen on headphones, but you feed other encoders if you want to. So after the Omnia processing, inside the Pro Stream, there are not one, but in our beta versions, there are 2 encoders. You can run different algorithms on them. You could run one of them as MP3 and another one as HEAAC V2 if you wanted to. So you have these different algorithms available at different bit rates if you like. And then from each of these outputs, each of these encoders, you can send to multiple different servers. So maybe you've got 2 Shoutcast servers, geographically separated for reliability, and maybe you've got an Icecast server somewhere, and maybe you're feeding to the folks at Live 365 or Stream Guys. You can feed any of these services with the outputs, the output ports on the Pro Stream. So if you want to check it out, I encourage you to do so. The list price is under $2,000. You can probably get a discount from your favorite dealer, and I highly encourage you to check it out. Lots of radio stations are using the Telos Pro Stream, and so are the folks at the GFQ network. In fact, if you're watching at gfqlive.tv, you can click on the audio button. It says 64 kilobits per second. Happens to be an MP3 stream. We hope to change it over to an AAC stream later on, and you can hear the Telos Pro Stream in action. Thanks to the folks at Telos. The website is telos-systems.com/ProStream to see all about the ProStream. All right, back to our show, episode 157 with Paul Brenner, our guest from MS Communications and the Radio Broadcasters Traffic Consortium. Chris Tobin, I'm sorry, man. You've been so polite for not butting in.
That's quite all right. You had some great questions.
Mr. Curious Cat here. What questions have you got for Paul on the subject we've been talking about?
I'm just curious. I don't get to see much or hear much about the product and the services. What are broadcasters doing to get the word out, or how are they just? Is it just strictly behind the scenes, so to speak, with the manufacturers and the retail side of the business? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it's behind the scenes. I get on a plane with the Nokia team, and I go from Torrance, California to all over Germany, to Asia, Canada. I guess I get right in front of the automakers, and a lot of that happens behind the scenes. The effort from the day that anyone in our group gets a hold of an automaker that's interested, it takes about 2 years of development. That's just a natural curve that happens in the auto world. What I will say, though, is I've found a lot more frequently that either through the HD Radio Alliance and their inventory, or even Garmin just spending money or other folks, that I'm hearing more and more commercials on the air for it. So, it's really proving itself as something desirable by the consumer. So if there's something I've seen the broadcaster do as a role is, promoting it. And I've even seen some stations not owned by Emmis that are doing giveaways, and saying, here's a Garmin with free traffic provided by HD Radio. So I would say the role by the broadcaster has probably been more promotional than technical.
Paul,
let me
go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to jump in a little bit here from the broadcaster side. I can tell you from having lots of experience with BTC and keeping our systems running. There also is a commitment from the broadcasters in terms of uptime and maintenance and those sorts of things as well, which translates actually into excellent service for the people with the receivers. In most markets, at least in Milwaukee, 2 of the stations here are running at the same time. So both the FMs are running at the same time. And there's an uptime guarantee on availability and that sort of thing. But also, the other upside to it is obviously with a paycheck coming in, we're a whole lot more interested, not that we weren't before, but of making sure that, the HD signals are on and are working and are doing their job. So we spent some money in monitoring and notifications and things like that. So I think, there's another side to that. And I also think, it's a good, if people aren't doing it already, it's done a good job of getting engineers thinking outside of the box with, things like carrying data. I mean, again, we talk about, well, what does the audio sound like? Blah, 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 blah. I did it. I did MP3. I've done, or I did extended partitions. I've done regular partitions. And to be honest with you, when we turned it on, I kept both my main channels at 48, which is what they were. The sub channels is where I carved some of that data out. And I can tell you that, there really wasn't much of a difference when we did it. We're really not talking about a whole lot of data. It does require that, you, again, just like anything else, if you process your secondary, your HD2s where you're carving the data out of, you do a good job with audio processing on that, it sounds fine. But again, it requires that you do a good job of networking your plant, because obviously this data comes in from outside, so there's firewall issues and there's things like that. But then also your importers and your exporters have to be in good condition, and you have to keep an eye on those and make sure that those are functioning. So it does require some work that way, but if you're thinking ahead and you're planning for that, I can tell you that, every once in a while, I'll get a BTC notification that, one of my stations is having some issues, and, right away jump on that and get it taken care of. But it really, in the few years that we've been doing it, it hasn't been a hassle at all from our end, from the engineering side. But the caveat is that you have to do a good job of setting that up in the first place.
Yeah,
and,
I think that's key.
It really is. And again, when we looked at, that kind of led to, again, with this other project that we're working on with RDS, it really, I think, that's the BTC has done a good job of, kind of shedding the light on the fact, even before that with, Microsoft and their Spot project that didn't go very far.
Yeah.
Right. Direct band. That there is this bandwidth that we have available that we can use on a one-to-many basis that works really, really well for these sorts of things. It's just that for so long we've kind of, we've kept our heads kind of out of that part of the game and said, whatever, it's great, title art artist, yay. I mean, those are fantastic, but there are all these other opportunities to use it for. And I don't know, Paul, if you can touch on a little bit too. There's even with the RDS, with the nav systems, traffic isn't the only thing they've been sending.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And I could tell you that like my receiver receives, and I'm sure that's paid for the content provider, but things like restaurants and coffee shops and things like that on the display as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, weather, fuel. You got some great points there, Chris, and I really appreciate the fact that you raised the service uptime and the readiness, because we go through a process of selection where we pick a call sign or a signal by coverage, and then we do an operational review of that station. And a lot of times it happens at a corporate level. A lot of the stations fill them out, but we look at their readiness. And I would say out of all the stations we launch with, probably almost half of them had to take the time to revisit the versions of their HD system, the infrastructure to deliver IP, you know, from the internet into the location of the equipment, whether it's importer at the studio or at the transmitter, or the STL link, you know, being a legacy unidirectional path, you know, like a UDP one way. I would say probably half of those required people to think about the stuff Chris just said. You know, how do I make my station ready? And the reality is that there are other things you can do once you have that, and obviously Chris has done some. You know, we have other things that we broadcast. I will tell you, we've done some prototypes that were pretty interesting. We did a prototype that was shown at CES 2 years ago, where we put an HD radio in an e-reader, and we broadcast HTML breaking news over local markets. And a newspaper company who was doing that with this prototype. So, you know, there was an HD radio, and so they wanted something to take over the screen with, you know, there's a flood in the area, or there's a, you know, a disaster, that we sent that out over the air. A tsunami was one of our examples, I think, and tsunami in Hawaii. And then another one we've done with data is sending database updates to vehicles. So take a luxury car, has let's say a song album art database in the local machine, or a piece of software that makes the infotainment system run. In a commute time, we sent enough data to the car to update that database record and reboot itself and be fresh. And we did that with about 5 to 7 kilobits per second of allocation. So there's other things I think that will happen in the future. Right now, we're just establishing that it's capable and that stations can do it, and, you know, that we can deliver it. So.
Uh-oh, did we lose Kirk?
We might have lost.
I think I'm still here.
Okay.
I just lost a few seconds of audio from Paul.
Oh,
and here, you know, here's the other thing to keep in mind too, is that even with, you know, all these things that we're starting to do with data on RDS and HD radio, not only does it not take away from any of those services that you're currently using, but in some cases you make some changes that improve things. For example, one of the things we do with the BTC stuff is we changed some payload data in the HD radio system. The payload changes a little bit in terms of call sign and time and things like that. The result is actually it a lot of times results in faster acquisition on the receiver side of the HD radio signal, and also a little more durability to it. So you know, there's those sorts of things. You know, the data coming over the RDS hasn't really affected at all that we could tell title and artist. But on the other hand, you know, as Paul mentioned, in some cases, now my stations were already running 5% injection, but some stations are running 2-3% injection on their subcarrier. They found that at 5%, it becomes very solid and it works very, very well. So in some of this innovation also came as a side, you know, almost as kind of a side effect, that we've improved some of the things that we were currently doing as a side effect of all this. So again, you know, and I remember, you know, even a year or two ago when we were talking about HD radio, you know, one of the things that I've seen over the years is it has, even just the act of putting in HD radio, if you're doing your job, has resulted in improvements in many other things, because it causes you to rethink how you're doing things and improve on them and replace some things that maybe, you know, are old and outdated.
Yeah, you got a great perspective, Chris. I mean, I like that. It's kind of a, you know, look at it as the ability to refresh and revisit. And I think that's probably why you guys do such a good job up there in Milwaukee and Madison.
So I'm curious about something that was said earlier about stations promoting this. Honestly, I don't understand what the benefit is to a station to promote this, other than to hopefully have people, you know, buy Garmin receivers or buy cars that use the service, thereby helping to ensure the income stream. But in this way, the station is really just acting like a pipe for somebody else's data and getting paid for it. It's not like they're running a contest that involves Garmin or traffic or coffee shops. Do you see, and you may disagree with my opinion on that, or my first thought or comment, do you see, though, broadcasters having this, not a big pipe, but having a small to medium-sized pipe over a huge area, do you see that as being monetized in ways that don't have anything to do with promotions on the air, don't have anything to do with the station promoting its dial position or its artists or its or getting more people to listen, just being a transport company?
I'm not sure if I had a question there or not. I was making
it's a great question. I often get in an argument with not argument, but a healthy debate with people in our industry about how do we as an industry convert ourselves from being broadcasters to technologists, and it's a kind of a philosophical debate. Really, I'm not trying to say we should stop broadcasting great radio stations and creating local content, but that's really the focus. And I think that there is a lot of technology in radio. There's a lot of smart people that do technology in radio. There's got to be some other ideas out there that make us more like a technology industry. And I think the things you're kind of thinking about are there. If you think about a large market that has 15, 20 HD radio stations in the market, they're really strong stations, operated well. If you said there was 10 kilobits per second of data left over on each one of those call signs to do something with, you're talking about 10 kilobits times 20. And, from a payload perspective, using some kind of compressed technology like native binary format, which is what we use for our technology, you can get a lot of data into a broadcast stream, and especially something like that runs 24/7, 365. So I actually, I hope that the BTC, let's say 3 years from now, we're in a majority of cars sold every year. We're viewed as a telematics solution by the industry, which we're kind of still dabbling in it. Would other people come to us like, Honda or GM and say, we'd love to find a way to use the radio industry to send recall notices to dashboards, and we'll pay you for it? Or, some kind of alert to part of the emergency alert system. We'd love to be able to send that as a data payload to dashboards. I think all those things are possible, but it's going to really require us to think more like technology companies than radio companies.
Do you think
here's one thing I wanted to jump in, because somebody is mentioning something in the IRC room here, and talking about we don't need broadcasters, content still counts. Let me get on my soapbox for just a moment, and then I'll let you guys get back to your discussion. You know what? We aren't doing our job as broadcasters if we don't do things like this. And Paul hit the nail on the head exactly. We are technology. It may not be always thought of as a sexy technology or a progressive technology, but the technology is there. Yes, content is still king. However, there are so many other things that we can do with this data availability, with the bandwidth that we have, that it almost is wasteful if we don't. And I think it's time as engineers that we need to get smarter about that. And, yes, we can put a radio station on the air. We can make audio come out of the other side. That's great. But there's a lot of other things we could be doing. And I think, we talk about how, radio is a dying industry. People love to say that. Oh, sorry about Pandora. Well, guess what? These are things that we can do that they can't. And these are going to be things that are going to keep us viable into the future. And if we don't get people in our industry thinking about these things, we are going to die. And these are, so these are important discussions to have and important things to think about. And yes, it is absolutely about the content. If your radio station is, sucks, you're not going to get anywhere. However, there's so much more to what we do than just putting, audio on the air. And we need to start thinking that way if we're ever going to make anything out of this.
Yeah, well, you have the technology has to augment what you do. As you pointed out, the content is definitely important. And then you augment the content in either delivery methods or content is spared off. Like say for instance, I was thinking about this the other day, talking to someone having a similar heated debate. I won't say an argument or a fight, but radio station person I was talking with, programming person, was trying to explain to me why you can't sell or monetize the web. You can't do this, you can't do that. I was like, well, you can do a lot of things. And speaking to what Paul's talking about with BTC and the various technologies and the data that you get off that whole project, what if you had a website that when you call it up on your mobile device, because you have websites that know it's a mobile device by the web ID, you now have maybe a portion of that BTC traffic going to the website mobile device, so you get the radio station's website plus, an added feature of traffic. Now your listener is looking at your website, your call letters, and says, oh, I need the latest traffic information, or maybe weather or something else. I know where to go. So now you've created an ecosystem of your own with the new technology, and you don't seem old and staid. And it's like, oh yeah, my favorite radio station does more than just say the FM box on the table.
Yeah, I would love people to approach us with that.
I get so tired of this whole HD radio is evil and we need to stop doing these things and we need to just go back to 1940. And it's crazy. It's just, somebody mentioned here, well, somebody screwed up their Sirius signal with HD. And, there's a lot of anecdotal things like that. I'll tell you what, if your HD radio is struggling with your stereo signal in the fringes, then you're doing it wrong. There's something wrong with the way it's installed. There's something wrong with your plant. Those problems are fixable. Let's just go, well, let's shut it down. I can't get it's not working. And that it just, can you tell I get frustrated with that?
Well, I think Paul had it right about the technologist, or like I used to call myself, a solutionist at a previous employer. And the hardest part I had was dealing with people who wouldn't break out of the mold of learning what's new and what's going on. I worked at stations that we did a lot of HD, a lot of HD1, HD2, HD3. We did a lot of things, and unfortunately, a lot of the folks I worked with, they just didn't know what to do with it. They're like, well, okay, now we got this thing. Well, we're told to do it by corporate. Okay, but we need to focus on this. And as Chris pointed out, you got to have people focusing and say, hey, what do we need to do? How do we get this? Okay, let's make it happen. Then just run with it. Just like we did back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when FM first came out in the 60s. People were like, whoa, what's this thing I got?
I don't know how hard it... I have to work really, really hard to get our programming people to understand why HD is important, because that's their attitude. It's nobody listens to that. I don't care if it's off, kind of thing. And it's our job to really explain that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uses for it. I think I'm to clarify, I love radio. I mean, I think the localism of the content and the personalities and the things that people are told through local radio are viable and important. Don't get me wrong. I think we play too many commercials, but that's a different story.
That's that old thinking. That's the problem.
That's that old, that's just, spot load. But I also understand the economics of loans and payments. So, but I will tell you, and I'll bring this to you, I think you'll find it interesting, is I get to travel the world and sit across the table from the people that plan the future of their desktop, right? So I'm in front of the senior vice president of strategy for large U.S. automaker 1 and large Asian automaker 2. And I get to talk about our technology, and HD radio is important to them. Believe it or not, the ability to send album art makes them very happy to put them on par with other platforms. If you don't believe me, go to the HD Radio Alliance Task Force page. Look at one of my videos I've done as co-chair of the task force. I believe in it, and I believe in it because I've sat with these folks and heard, why haven't you gone to digital? You can do album art, you can do buy buttons, you can provide side channels that have content that not only competes with Sirius XM, but sounds better than them, because their encoding is for crap and they've overspent their bandwidth allocation. So why aren't you seizing this opportunity? In fact, when the BTC really started to take off about 3 years ago, I would be in like Germany or Asia, and these groups would say, well, you're the BTC. Can't you just make all the stations in America do better with HD radio? And I said, I don't own all these stations. I lease bandwidth from these stations. And they said, well, you should go back and tell them that if they could really embrace that digital radio could be a very viable way to offset your competition with satellite and really kind of fend off the penetration of Pandora and others in the car, and that's why I come back a lot of times trying to evangelize the technology aspect of what we do, because we get so focused on just we're FM content and we're AM content. What else can we do with it, and what else can we do to keep us viable in the car?
I like that. I like that a lot. Man, we've been talking for an hour. I think it's time we're gonna have to kind of draw things to a close. So we got to summarize this as best we can so we can filter it and think about it and shake it up and come back and ask questions some other time. One thing, Paul, that concerned me is, okay, the traffic model, the traffic data model, I think works pretty well, because you've got a high concentration. Where you have traffic problems is typically where you have a high concentration of cars and people, and you tend to have a lot of radio stations there, and so you've got coverage. What do you do in Missoula, Montana? Is there a need, a market? Is there a place for HD delivered data in Missoula, Montana, or West Undershirt, Arkansas?
People don't care about traffic in Missoula, Montana, but they sure care about weather. And and they care about tornadoes, and they care about blizzards, and they care about national weather alerts for floods. In those markets where you go number one traffic in the top 80 markets in the U.S., top 75, it literally flips, and you get into somewhere in North Dakota, South Dakota, well, even out there where it matters that the storm's coming. That is important to them. And matter of fact, that's one of the launches we're going to do this year that is going to be really, I think, quite fascinating. And I'd love to come back and just brief you guys on it when it's actually launched, because it is very, very innovative. And it's innovative because we finally convinced an automaker that we weren't just sending some random traffic, that we were sending something that could really blow the minds of people that have their car. And what they've done with it, I've seen examples of it the last 2 days in our drive test. I just can't believe that it came over radio. And I do this for a living. So I look at it and go, are you kidding me? That came over our radio station? And what? You rasterized that into what? And it's just, I'd love to come back and show you. But, you're right. It has to fit the market, but it can be compelling. And, in summary, it is lucrative. I think that's the most important part, and why people like the leaders of Intercom, the leaders of Radio One, and other the other 24 radio groups that have committed bandwidth to me. They're all getting paid, and it's because even in a diluted model, when you sell yourself as innovative and cutting edge and new, the price tag is not the GDP low budget radio ad. It is the holy cow. How much money do you want to give me for that? It's a totally different concept, and I get excited about that because I like to make money.
And in fact, Kirk, I think the Missoula, Montanas of the world are actually a great example of why we need to do this. If you look at those remote areas, you're talking about signals like these Class Cs that cover almost half the state in a place where there isn't a lot of technology going on and there isn't a whole lot of bandwidth available to the people out there. So you've got farm reports, you've got weather, whatever. You can't look at it as, this is a great traffic thing. This is data. It's raw data that can be used in a number of different ways in areas where there may not be a whole lot of bandwidth available to distribute information.
Absolutely.
Oh, and in areas where there may not be very good cellular coverage. So that ad may not be a good avenue for data delivery.
Yeah, and if it's cellular coverage, it's probably 2G or lame 3G. Yeah. So it's definitely.
I got one more quick question. Somebody has, I'm sure, thought about this a lot. It seems like everything we know about gets hacked. Are we going to see zombie alerts on our traffic, on our Garmin traffic?
Man, wouldn't that be cool? I would like to see. Yeah. I would like to see maybe like Chris Tarr's face show up on every Garmin in America, all at one time with that big smile and just wouldn't that be great? Do you think you can pull that off, Chris?
I'd love to pull that off, but I don't have the security information to do it.
Not yet, you don't.
I mean, my partner is one of the largest technology companies in the world. They make phones. They are overtly secure and sensitive. We actually sat down. It's a great question because in our design, we sat down with Ubiquiti. We sat down with Nokia. We used some security experts. We built a model that has very trusted sources, has very ornate algorithms to kind of secure that we're talking to the importer we think we're talking to. And if that would change, we would shut it off. I think we sat in a cubicle for a month. I built an HC radio station in a box, and we sat in a cubicle for a month in Nokia and broke this thing down into parsed hex code to make sure that we weren't doing something that was dangerous. And like I said, we looked at this as a technology, not as a broadcaster. And because I think we ended up with a really secure system, and I'm proud of it. I mean, I really am. And I'm proud of the people that built it with us.
Do you see this technology, data delivery over HD, as playing a part in any kind of emergency information, like EAS? I hope the FCC doesn't make EAS, doesn't force you to do EAS, because I think EAS is just, I think it's pretty broken.
Well,
I think broadcasters who want to serve their communities have plenty of ways to get emergency information out.
I hope not.
But
I hope not, and I'll tell you why. I hope not. I sat on, and I'm almost ashamed to say this, I served on CISRIC. Are you familiar with CISRIC?
No, what's that?
Communication Security Reliability and Interoperability Council, of course. FCC 2 years ago, my job was to serve on the subcommittee that rewrote CFR 47 Part 11, which is now known as the EAS CAP Compliance Regulation. I sat on that for a year and drafted that document. I was the only IT guy in the whole group. I argued till I was blue in the face that there should be internet requirements, there should be security, there should be no allowance of a CAP compliant box sitting outside of a firewall. You should have rules around password changes. You should treat it like an IT box, and the zombie alert happened. I was so furious about that because I was there. I should have made a difference and I didn't. And for the reasons that I couldn't get past the bureaucracy of the people that really didn't want that kind of rule put on top of them, I hope EAS doesn't come to me and say, would you carry our data? Because I don't think that they think things through enough. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody on the call. But, I was there and I know how they operate. And I just feel that, this kind of system, let the commercial enterprise build it. Let the private enterprise build it. If there's something to do with EAS, I'm open to talking to them. But at this point, I can tell you we send National Weather Service alerts. We do a real good job with it. And the automakers that adopt it are going to have information in their cars that's well beyond the EAS capability.
Yeah. That's what I think. Guys, we got to, speaking of shutting it down, we got to shut this down. It's past my bedtime.
Oh,
we've been, Chris Tobin, do you have any last comments that you want to make?
Oh, no. I agree with Paul with the security issues. Tom Ray and I actually attended a FEMA CAP meeting about 2 years ago, and we brought up the same questions, same concerns for security with the internet stuff. And it was interesting. The documents they handed out had everything in there except how do you prevent spoofing, and I just was appalled.
I was so frustrated because I brought all those issues up, and the bureaucracy of the people involved that didn't want they didn't want rule setting, they wanted guidelines, and so I really hate that, and I'm glad that you guys notice that kind of stuff. It goes into this whole discussion about being a technologist, not a broadcaster. Don't worry about where a box is or lowest maintenance. How can you protect it?
Yeah, exactly.
Chris,
so good for you.
Any last things?
My only conversation or my only thought on the EAS thing is I kind of chuckle about leave it to the broadcasters who care to solve EAS. I got news for you. That'll be probably 15 stations that actually run EAS then. Unfortunately, because it's hard enough with it mandated. It's hard enough with it mandated to get program directors and everybody else to even run tests, let alone anything else. So, I think it's up to us to build a better mousetrap if it's going to work. But believe me, leaving it to the good intentions of others is probably not the best idea in the world until we can actually create something that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that mandatory nationwide thing, and most stations transmitted 45 seconds worth of absolute garbage. I can understand why program directors are not very interested in EAS.
The trifecta of CAP message.
Here's something, but I mean that's a problem down the road that we, if we think about it, we can start solving now. Something, break the EAS mold and start over, and come up with a way using data that maybe there's a way to solve that problem that isn't that first of all is easy to use that isn't going to drive program directors nuts and is going to get the job done. And maybe the answer's out there. We just haven't found it.
The answer's actually out there already. The technology's been around for 50 years. It's the same technology they use it for watermarking. You could use that technology. You don't have to hear it. Only things that have to hear are the boxes designed for it. And it's addressable, and you can do a lot with it. And nobody wants to talk that. That was something that, I remember sitting on a couple of those EAS goofy meetings about 10 years ago with the manufacturers, and I, as a broadcaster, I was at a table and I said, guys, we don't need to hear tones on the radio. This is why broadcasters don't want to do it. Because it's an emergency, working with local emergency groups is one thing, but when you start putting tones on the radio, people become numb to it. Watermarking works great for everybody else, and they make money with it. Why can't we use it for emergency alerting? It's also done in the public safety sector, too. They do a lot of stuff that's subaudible.
Yeah, Shazam is telling you what song you're listening to, and we've got an electronic donkey going off whenever there's
Exactly! it can be solved, but Paul's right. You got to look at it from a technology. Broadcasting is the content. Technology is how the content gets to the end user. Today, in 2013, the end user has 15 different ways of getting your content. Broadcasters probably 80% of the time offer about 2 ways: FM, AM, and web. After that, it becomes whatever gets out there. That's my opinion. Just me.
Man,
so before you wrap up, Kirk, if I could, I mean, we didn't get on the subject too much, but if I could just have one plug, because I'm also leading the effort to build the FM radio smartphone that we're. If you just tell people, maybe people could just, if they get time, go to register for our event next Wednesday. We had an event yesterday to show off the app and what we're doing with the wireless carriers to get FM radio in every smartphone in America. We have an event. Either we're gonna have a video link to watch what we did yesterday, or you can go to nextradioapp.com events and sign up for the one that we're having next Wednesday, I think. And I think you'll really find it interesting. So I just one quick plug on that.
And I've already signed up myself for next Wednesday. This is on March the 6th, 2013. So you can watch that webinar live. And then in case you have to miss that, then you say, Paul, that you're going to make that available after the fact.
We recorded the video yesterday. That was the actual show. We had 168 broadcast companies attend yesterday. Wow. And we went very well. And we recorded it, and that link will be available so you can watch it progressively if you'd like to, and an embed we'll serve up. So either way, but I'd just like people to know that it's out there, and it kind of falls right into this discussion about technologist versus radio broadcaster.
We'll put that address in the show notes, nextradioapp.com/events, and you can sign up. It's free to watch the webinar on March the 6th, 2013. I sure encourage you to do that. I'm going to be watching it myself. Good deal. All right, Paul, thank you so much. Paul from MS Communications, Paul Brenner, award-winning engineer. And thank you for your forward-thinkingness and you're willing to reach out and try new things.
Good. I hope I didn't geek out too much on your
perfect.
Not at all.
And also, live in the GFQ studios in Queens, New York, Chris Tobin. Thanks for being with us, Chris.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And Chris Tarr from Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Chris, I appreciate so much when you can make time to be with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Good.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry. Did I step on somebody?
I just said thanks to those guys for their great questions and everything.
Our show is brought to you by the folks at Telos, and this week it's the Telos ProStream on the web at telos-systems.com/ProStream. Appreciate Telos very much for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We're going to see you next week with another great show of This Week in Radio Tech. Goodbye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pilfer this week. Another twit is propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.